of walking on the street, taking photos of the breads that I was holding, and then people in the neighborhood thinking, what is this person doing? Why are they taking so many photos of their bread?
I'm Zöe Hollander. I'm an artist from The Hague. 38 years old, non-binary, and I've been working as a professional artist for, I think, about 10 to 12 years, kind of on and off. And I see myself as someone with many different hats. Like I do a lot of things occasionally. So I do occasional publishing, I do occasional graphic design, occasional scenography, occasional DJing. So a lot of things alongside each other. But it all kind of comes together under the moniker of artist. One theme that kind of comes back in my work every now and then is the relation between bodies and spaces. And these can be like different types of bodies, but also different types of spaces. Often these being exhibition spaces and maybe my own body, for example. Publishing for me it feels like a very natural extension of the rest of my artistic practice. Because I also do, I work a lot with text in my work, I do a lot of writing, or, well, not a lot of writing, I do occasional writing again. And putting those things into books just feels like a very natural step. The way I work is that I come up with a specific idea or a theme, and then I look for what the right medium is. And sometimes it's a book, sometimes it's an installation. Very occasionally, maybe it's both. But I feel like I work from quite a conceptual framework, and then the medium comes kind of after.
Yeah, so for me it's really convenient if a book or any kind of project comes with its own framework, because it kind of limits the ideas that I can put in. And in some way, I've realized that if I set myself slightly more limitations, that actually creates the possibility for much more ideas and creativity. So this one good example of that. Many of these books I've made under my old name, which is something that you'll see on the books. But for this book, I made this physical cabinet, and I really used that as a sandbox in my dance studio. And when I made that sandbox, really just for trying out certain ideas. And at some point when I was building it, I realized that if I was making this anyway, I might as well document the whole process. And then when I realized that, I thought, well, I might as well turn it into a book then. And then instead of it just being a sandbox, it also became like a three-dimensional space to design books. So all of the design elements that are in the book also had to be physically in this cabinet space. So there's page numbers at some point when I was trying out page numbers. And there's a lot of different things that come together, and this really turned out to be like kind of a machine of ideas that kind of fed itself. So every spread is really a response to the one before, and it kept on leading to new ideas somehow. Also new and different printing techniques. You might not see it at a first glance. But my time at the Jan van Eyck Academy was very double in a way, because I was having a great time with making this book, but at the same time I was really depressed. So there's a lot of personal stories in this publication. So it's almost like this publication is art project, but also a diary at the same time. It being personal without screaming that it's personal. A lot of the things that are in here I made specifically for this project and cabinet, but there are also just a lot of leftovers or old works or reframings or new works. There's also sometimes work of other artists that I put in there. It's a way of making maybe miniature exhibitions, but really treating every type of material as having the same value. So artworks that I made in the past did not have a different value from objects that I found on the street or maybe in a thrift store.
Well, the first time that I started with publishing was as I was making installations at the time, and I was looking for a way to be able to spread my work in an easier way. So it was the format of publishing was very accessible in order to distribute my work, and at the same time I found that it was a really good platform for just working on very small, simple ideas that I had, like a series of photos that I took on the street, and sort of being able to put those together in a book kind of made them into a collection.
So this one happened, I think, over a period of 2 or 3 years, where I would go to like a local bakery and get like 2 of these little breads and often like a simit, and then I was carrying them home and I realized that I was carrying a letter. So then I decided that I had to collect the whole alphabet.
Something that interested me a lot when I started making books, it's that books have a certain a way of convincing us that whatever is in them is like worthy of publishing or worthy of printing. And I've also like at some point in my practice made some books that don't actually have, there's nothing really in them, but I see them as sculptures because they only have a cover and they convey a certain idea. So they sort of gesture to the possible existence of a book. So one example is this one, which is a book that I made as kind of a joke gesture towards the curator and writer Hans-Ulrich Obrist. At some point he was this extremely present figure, and he had this book that was called Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Hans-Ulrich Obrist But Were Afraid to Ask. And I thought like making a book like that about yourself was somehow a way of being maybe so full of yourself that I wanted to like make a book that was even more about him and also exclusive for him. So that's how I end up making this book, and also making it in the style of other books that he published. So I still have a fantasy of just putting this into random bookstores, maybe at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, just putting it in the shelves and then hoping someone would take it. A lot of the works that I have made in the past could be considered art about the art world itself and all its weird and exclusive mechanics. And I find that world kind of fascinating. There's so many things that are possible, and we're all doing, like, there's so many artists doing completely crazy stuff, and we're all taking each other like extremely seriously. And at the same time, some things are completely laughable. Like there's so many unwritten rules that I found that a huge web to sort of pick from.
I had these bunch of texts lying around that I had written on the occasion of exhibitions before, but then they kind of stopped having a life after this exhibition ended. And I think they had a certain potential to be more than just an exhibition text or a text that I wrote for one presentation. So I guess I wanted to give them a slightly longer life and also put them into a new context.
When I started out as an artist, the spaces that I was relating to were more more general spaces, or maybe like exhibition spaces, for example. And over time, I think the spaces that I relate to have become more personal. And I think that's also something that in the past years, there's like more and more of my, I guess, personality that has like flown into my work.
I think in the past year, specifically, I've been working a lot with fabric. And I've always had a great interest in fabric and fashion, and as also a means to express myself. I guess fabric is like, you could also maybe consider it a space or a material that's very close to the body. So working with that material definitely comes together with this working in a more personal manner.
And at the same time, it's a material that allows for a much more intuitive working, because like I've only got like a sewing machine for like maybe 1 year or so. So I don't really consider myself an expert in that field. But it's a means of really working in the moment. Whereas oftentimes, well, maybe also with designing a book or publishing a book, there's a lot of time that goes into the designing and into the processing how to publish something, and then at some point you send it off to the printer, and then you have it in your hands.